The cleanup effort after the Baltimore Bridge collapse is underway, with workers starting to cut the Francis Scott Key Bridge into pieces. Reopening the Port of Baltimore is a top priority. Workers have begun the challenging task of slicing the destroyed bridge to clear the vital shipping channel. The port, which handles a significant portion of the nation's cargo, remains closed after the bridge collapse. Officials are rushing to clear debris spanning 700 feet, with cranes poised to lift wreckage from the trapped container ship dolly. The closure of the port has significant economic implications, affecting thousands of jobs and disrupting the flow of goods. Lawmakers are considering a temporary financial relief program to support affected workers. President Biden has pledged full federal support for the rebuild, with emergency relief funds already allocated. However, the process is expected to be lengthy and costly, with estimates exceeding $1 billion. Engineers emphasize the need for new safety standards for bridges, with many lacking adequate protection from ship impacts. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides funding for bridge repairs, but more investment is needed nationwide. The focus remains on reopening the Port of Baltimore, with round-the-clock operations underway to clear the channel and remove debris from the collapsed bridge.
That cargo will be redistributed between the Port of Virginia, the Port of New York, and the Port of Philadelphia.
Baltimore handles more cars and farm equipment than any other port in America.
Baltimore is the largest in the nation and certainly by far the largest on the U.S. East Coast, and there isn't a single place that can replace them.
The port generates over $5 billion in worker wages, roughly $650 million in state and local tax revenue, and more than 50,000 jobs, including roughly 8,000 port workers, like crane operator John Zafia.
We're all wondering how long it's going to take to clear the main channel so we can get ships back in so we can work.
Maryland lawmakers are now crafting a bill that, if greenlit, would stand up a temporary financial relief program run by the Department of Labor. It's designed to help workers who regularly clock in at the port, and now they're waiting for it to reopen. Mark?
Nicole Skanga with new pictures and new reporting. Thanks. President Biden says he'll visit Baltimore next week. Natalie Brand's at the White House with more on how the federal government plans to help get things moving. Natalie?
Good evening, Mark. The president has pledged full federal support for the rebuild. The Department of Transportation says right now it has around $950 million in emergency relief funds. Maryland has begun to get some of that money, but the administration says it's likely lawmakers may have to approve more.
This is a project of national significance. The port has a national impact.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen hopes Congress will agree, as its support could be needed for a future Key Bridge. So it could be 100% federally covered.
The emergency relief program will, by design, cover 90%. And Senator Cardin and I will introduce legislation to cover the other 10%. Again, also making sure that the federal government gets credited for any funds that come in because of liability from the ship owners or others.
He estimates the price tag could exceed $1 billion. Engineers say the project could take years and will include new safety standards not in place when the Key Bridge was initially built. Despite improved measures today, CBS News analysis found a majority of U.S. bridges that have ships passing under them lack impact protection.
I think as a result of this, there's probably going to be more vulnerability studies, if they haven't done them already, on various bridges that have large vessels passing under them.
The bipartisan infrastructure law passed in 2021 provided around $40 billion to repair bridges nationwide, but that's just a fraction of the more than $300 billion that the American Road and Transportation Builders Association estimates is needed. Mark?
Natalie Brand at the White House. Thanks.
At a press conference today, Governor Wes Moore and leaders of the Unified Command emphasized that their #1 priority is reopening the Port of Baltimore. It's a long road ahead, but one of the first steps is happening right now. We want to turn to Caroline Forback now. And Caroline, we understand crews have already started removing part of the wrecked bridge from that area, right?
Yes, Kelsey, that's right. The process of removing the wreckage from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse has begun today. We've actually been able to see the sparks from where these highly trained demolition crews have started to cut a portion of the collapsed bridge into smaller sections, which will then be removed by crane.
We're going to conduct our first lift today on a piece of a portion of the bridge just north of that deep draft shipping channel.
A major step to clearing the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and clearing the channel.
The north sections of the Key Bridge are going to be cut up and removed. This will eventually allow us to open up a temporary restricted channel that will help us to get more vessels in the water around the site of the collapse.
Saturday, Governor Wes Moore said round-the-clock operations are underway to get the Port of Baltimore reopened as quickly and safely as possible, with 377 people actively engaged in response efforts.
Maryland's economy and Maryland workers rely on us to move quickly.
Thousands of jobs have been directly impacted by this collapse. Friday night, the Small Business Administration approved a disaster declaration. Small businesses affected by the collapse can now apply for disaster loan assistance from the federal government.
Our priority is to make sure that all those thousands of Marylanders and others whose livelihood depends on the Port of Baltimore get back to work as soon as possible.
Also today, Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman confirmed that residents of Pasadena have reported debris washing up on Riviera Beach. The Maryland Department of the Environment says inspectors are on site investigating this, and the Coast Guard says they're working up to set up a hotline where people can report debris floating up. Reporting live here in Dundalk, Caroline Forback for WJZ.
A complex operation to reopen the Port of Baltimore after the deadly Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. Several cranes, including the largest floating crane on the East Coast, arrived at the site. More vital equipment is on the way to remove debris on the nearly 100,000-ton cargo ship that rammed into the bridge on Tuesday. Wreckage has prevented divers from trying to recover the bodies of 4 of the victims. Nicole Skanga is in Baltimore. Nicole, good morning.
Good morning, Michelle. The Army Corps of Engineers says it's nearly done sonar mapping the channel. Now, once that's done, the next step will be to cut the collapsed bridge into pieces and then lift all of that twisted steel and concrete out.
A colossal crane capable of moving 1,000 tons, now poised to lift the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
This crane that we're looking at is massive. The thing we also know is this: so is the challenge ahead of us.
An estimated 2,000 to 3,000 tons of steel now sitting atop of the cargo ship Dolly.
It's at least going to get cut safely into 4 pieces, and then we'll slowly and deliberately take it off the front of that vessel.
Underway, 7 floating cranes, 10 tugboats, 9 barges, 8 salvage vessels, and 5 Coast Guard vessels. A fleet tasked with clearing the 700-foot channel.
The top priority for all the equipment that we're marshaling right here is going to be focused on clearing the channel.
Our work, and since the time of collapse, our work has only accelerated. And we have a series of 24/7 operations currently underway. Unified Command are conducting planning and engineering assessments 24 hours a day. We have assets on the water enforcing safety zones 24 hours a day. We have assessments on the dolly being conducted 24 hours a day. This is an around-the-clock operation. First, we need to continue to focus on recovery. Second, we need to clear the channel and open vessel traffic to the port. Third, we need to take care of all of the people who have been affected by this crisis. And fourth, we need to, and we will, rebuild the Key Bridge. As I mentioned yesterday, we need to do more work on clearing the channel in order to move forward. This is a remarkably complex operation, and our focus needs to be on unity of command and unity of effort. Conditions in the water make it unsafe for rescue divers, and we're not just talking about weather and wind. We're talking about debris. We're talking about wreckage. We're talking about pieces of the Key Bridge that are in the water. One of the mantras in the military that we learned was this: mission first, people always. And that's the mindset that we are applying to this work. Our economy depends on the Port of Baltimore, and the Port of Baltimore depends on vessel traffic. Maryland's economy and Maryland workers rely on us to move quickly, and it's not just Maryland that is being impacted. I'm also talking about the farmer in Kentucky. I'm also talking about the auto worker in Ohio. I'm talking about the restaurant owner in Tennessee. This is impacting all of us. And the nation's economy and the nation's workers are relying on us to move quickly and move together.
Our number one priority remains reopening the Port of Baltimore. And to do that, we've got to clear that deep draft channel. And so I've talked about our phases. We're going to continue with that, reopening the deep draft channel and remove that debris. We're going to then remove the ship